Hi everybody, welcome to another late live stream with myself, Garrod. How are you getting on? Going to discuss a few things tonight. It's I know it's late, but some of you will watch it hopefully in the morning as well, maybe on your way to work. But or maybe if you're up late and you have Sunday night blues, you can watch it as well. So tonight I'm going to talk about a very thorny issue: Israel-Palestine politics in Ireland, which is, I'll be honest with you, this isn't going to sell it too much, but it almost makes me nauseous. By the way, give me a heads up in the chat if you're hearing me okay, if everything's all right. But yeah, it's such a prickly issue. I've addressed it before. What I would say is that, like, thank you, Armchair Limerick Nationalist, for the old heads up there, and everybody else. But yeah, it's one of those issues that it's like, if you think of your layers of red pills, Western people are being replaced in their own countries by different interests. That's one thing, or whatever. What else is there? You name it. There are grades of this stuff, and it's sort of like, I would say anyway, in my experience, that describing the nuances and complexities of, in particular, Israel-Palestine politics within Ireland, within an Irish context, which usually is seen as something on the radical fringes or whatever, but it's big in Ireland. We have a history of colonial victimhood, let's say, or oppression from the Brits. So we relate with Palestine and blah, 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 blah. I mean, this is something I'll get into. But there's there are layers and layers to this, and it's there's this superficial view, then there's the deeper view, then there's the deeper view, and it's sort of complex. It's sort of like, it's hard to communicate it, not to sound condescending, to just anyone. It's in order to have a sensible conversation, you almost need someone who's initiated to PhD level, let's just say, and that sounds very wanky, but bear with me. I almost wish I were speaking to all the likes of it. Someone like Keith Woods, others would get all this stuff. I'm sure a lot of you will too. A lot of anons get it, anonymous people on Twitter who are very intelligent posters and stuff like that. They keep their identity on the low for obvious reasons. They get it, but in terms of the big players, the people with faces out, the people who work for publications and all that, you just don't really get this take out there. Everyone's happy to wave the tricolour Irish flag and say, oh, there's too much immigration, and there's almost no one to converse with about this. And I don't see anyone picking up on this obvious problem. If you're not already familiar, it's the problem of, let's say, Zionist influence in what is known as the Irish right-wing nationalist kind of populist movement, anti-immigration and all that stuff. That's common across a lot of Western countries, but I've been keeping a keen eye on the introduction of that into Ireland. And it's very subtle and it's complex. But anyway, I don't want to kind of bog you down or bog myself down with it. Suffice it to say that it's just there's a lot to it, and I'll get into it. I also want to talk a little bit about Dennis O'Brien. Recently made some comments about work from home in Ireland and how it's bullshit. And I've just been noticing a lot. This is kind of totally unrelated, but it'll be a separate thing I'll get onto, is the idea of, let's call it gombeen or business owner or whatever. You can use a pejorative, you can use a superlative. The capital class, or the people who run businesses, the people who accumulate capital and all that, versus like ordinary workers and stuff. And there's an interesting dynamic unfolding. And I've heard it for years. It's this kind of thing of, it's hard to get good workers, it's hard to get staff are getting very entitled and all this kind of rhetoric. And it's it's always been this dichotomy out there, but it's very apparent at the moment with things so tight. I just want to talk about conditions and stuff like that. I have a few videos to show you. I want to play a little bit of the Philip Dwyer versus Conor McAniff in Bundoran and Donegal, which is a whole, again, other story, but a perfect little encapsulation of it. So anyway, we'll watch a few videos. We'll talk. I kind of droned on a bit for the introduction about Israel-Palestine. In a way, it's because I just need to pull up some source material and kind of look at it and sort of like let the wine breathe a little bit, get talking about it. It could do with an essay to add some sort of structure to it. In a sense, maybe I'll write that at some point. I just think nobody's really talking about it. No one's talking about this. Everybody's happy with the immigration marches, anti-mass immigration marches, plantation marches, speeding up, getting more popular and all of that. And it's wonderful. And I'm reluctant to go down the divisive conspiracy theory kind of like, downer path. But, nobody talks about little things like GB News and The Telegraph and Ezra Levant and all these kind of entities showing up, and lots of different converging instances that obviously suggest, for anyone, like I say, who's got their masters in this stuff a little bit, can recognize that there are, of course, for a small country of 5 million Irish people, depending how you slice it, it's about 5 million no matter what way you slice it. A small country like that, caught up in a web of international geopolitical intrigue with a budding dissident movement, there are obviously going to be layers. It's not just everybody out with a tricolour Irish flag flying it, having a good time, ascendant, and you don't have massive forces at play. Politics is all about what's going on in the background. There's loads going on in the background. You don't get to just show up to demos in the numbers of 10, 20, 30,000, whatever it is, gathering steam all over the country and not have, especially when it's incoherent, no one really knows who leads it. It's persecuted, so nobody in a way wants to lead it. It's racked with all this kind of discord within it, again, because of the pressure from the regime, because it's a dissident movement. Just like Kurds in Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere, or just like, you name it, some sort of faction within, I don't know, Burundi or something. That's probably a bad example, but a more relevant country. You're going to have external actors and internal actors reaching a hand out to the drowning man or the struggling man because it's a dissident movement and it's persecuted domestically. You're going to have effectively external forces who want to weaponize it for their own uses, right? And that's just a reality the world over. It always has been. And so with that, you will get influence operations. By the way, I forgot to say this: like, subscribe. I don't know what difference it makes. Share it. I know what difference that makes. That's handy. Share it in your chat or whatever, if anybody cares. But you're going to have these influence ops. And of course, it's tied up with like the Zionist thing. It's tied up with American stuff like Atlanticist, the kind of Anglo-American regime, if you want to call it, the same sort of Ukraine, pro-Ukraine type of entity, which is hegemonic, like where we live in Ireland. And if you live in Europe, basically anywhere east of Ukraine, basically, right? And this includes Romania and then out to Australia, the rest. In the Western and Japan, others. That's the hegemonic force globally, if you discount Russia, China, and the rest of them. And we are firmly within the geopolitical hegemonic orbit of the Anglo-American Atlanticist sort of regime. And one of the main characterizations of that regime is Zionism. It is ran by a huge faction of Jewish Zionist sort of entities. So it could be anything from AIPAC to this, to that, the other. And it's not exclusively that. I'm not a believer that there's a single entity moves things like, oh, this mass immigration happened because of big business or cheap labor or Jewish Zionist influence and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's also the advent of technology, aeroplanes, la-di-da. There's loads of things. There's loads of confluence of factors that make it happen. But one of the big pillars of this thing, like I say, in one sense, it can be just Anglo-American. It could be financial. It could be you have I mean, various ethnic and religious strands and stuff, and just one of them is Jewish. They are obviously a sort of tribal, powerful, well-connected group that are represented at the highest levels of power, right, among other groups and among other interests. But that is one of them, and you could argue by now, if you say America is the hegemon, which it is, and you were to say which group is the most hegemonic group in America, I mean, there's a strong case, as people could argue other things, but there's obviously a strong case that it's a very Jewish sort of influenced regime. And I don't even think, I mean, I'm not trying to hedge or whatever. It's just, this isn't like a shock jock show I try to do, you know, and I try to be reasonable. You know, these kind of broad brush stroke statements like, you know, it's just Jewish, it's this, that, or the other, or the converse to say it's nothing to do with it. I just don't go down either of those. It's you know, I speak about a lot of things, a lot of factors, but this is one of them. And so if we live under the orbit of that, and Ireland is a bit of a sort of a prickly pear on the question of Israel, which is of course synonymous with the kind of global Jewish population and its influence. I would be breaking the éiRe rules there on what constitutes anti-Semitism or not, because you're basically not meant to conflate Jewry, like the global population of Jews, whether in America, London, Dublin, anywhere else, and Israel or Zionism. Obviously, the two are very wedded. It's a Venn diagram where both circles are almost on top of each other, right? And there's room for anti-Zionist Jews and pro-Zionist non-Jews and all that. But in general, obviously, the two are connected. And so you will, of course, get a sort of a conflict there where Ireland is under that hegemony. We're heavily run by America, clearly. We're obviously not a sovereign country. You could argue, it's debatable whether we could even be a sovereign country with our size. And so you're going to have that at play. Like when I circle back, to use that term, to dissident politics and these multi-million or billion euro dollar forces that have just money to piss away, basically, right, these days, for influence ops. And they control the online sphere to a certain extent, and dish out NGO money and secret under the table money and all of this. You're going to have influence ops left, right, and center. And so when you get back to Irish nationalism, I mean, I'm just kind of launching into the theory here a little bit. I suppose I'll just go with it. The obvious thing, TLDR, is that Ireland is en masse a very pro-Palestine country. Look up the Times of Israel or anything else, or any other publication. I don't know, maybe David Quinn in Ireland will talk about it. That they say it, oh, it's the Catholic heritage, it's the British Irish thing, we're the oppressed colony or whatever, so we identify with them. Or the Islamists, or whatever you want to call them, the Arab nationalists funded the éiRe back in the day. I don't know. For various reasons, Ireland supports Palestine very strongly, and that is true across the board. It's been polled and surveyed, and I'm pretty sure the support for Palestine is about 70% of people think Israel is an apartheid state. So that's a fairly strong baseline, right? And it's across all demographics, basically. It's not just blue-haired teenagers or whatever. And it's not just boomers or this or that. It's not rich or poor. It's kind of across the board. We all know Ireland is very strongly pro-Palestinian. And so if you are an influence opper, as described, Anglo-American, Atlanticist, very, very Jewish Zionist influenced, right? That would be a hegemonic force within the hegemon, if that makes sense. Maybe perhaps the dominant one of all. Then, of course, and if Ireland is floating occupied territories bills and condemning and excoriating Israel on the world stage, here's another one for you, by the way. Because, of course, this stuff is hard to quantify. I just went with AI to ask this question, you know, and AI is obviously sucking up data and sentiment from around the world neutrally. I didn't bias the question. I just said, which country in the world, in the Western world, is the most anti-Zionist? I asked Gemini and I asked Grok, and they both said very easily. Ireland is clearly far and away the most anti-Zionist country in the West. And so if Israel are engaging in global diplomacy, Hasbara, as they call it, or in a sense, like political advocacy around the world, well, they're not so much worried about China and Russia and, I don't know, Rwanda. They know some of these countries to varying extents. The global south, the developing world, are anti-Zionist, and that's kind of the way it is. But they also know that America still, this regime that I mentioned, is still hegemonic in the world. The international rules-based order, yet America acts unilaterally. It has control of nodes. If you read Henry Farrell on mutual interdependence and all this kind of stuff, or weaponized interdependence, America still largely controls your SWIFTs and this and that and the other, and they have the global navy or whatever, basically. So they're hegemonic. So Israel isn't so much, it's fighting the battle in every country in a way from its own perspective. But Ireland stands out because Ireland is within the Western Alliance, let's call it. The government and the state support Ukraine. Most people in the country, if they're fed the dog food on follow Ukraine and this and that, or they'll follow whatever the latest thing is, COVID or whatever. And yet the Irish people are strongly still anti-Zionist. Rabidly, a Jewish or a Zionist person might say, they would constitute it as latent anti-Semitism, etc. They are going to recognize a country. Even though we're a small country, we have a lot of impact, of course, the Irish diaspora and all the rest of it. And just Ireland stands out. No offense to a Finnish person, but I think they probably have a roughly similar population. I don't think Finland has the same sort of brand recognition across the West as Ireland does, So despite our small population, we have we have a lot of clout. We're, not to brag, but I think generally speaking across the world, whether you're in the developing world or the Western world, in my experience, the Irish passport, the Irish brand, the Irish everything is sort of well liked. Who doesn't really like Irish people, we're seen as middlemen or sort of third parties, peace brokers, all of this stuff. Our neutrality is admired, our anti-colonial struggle, our heritage, everything. It's admired. So, and we have people everywhere, let's say, much like Jews in Israel, in a sense. So we're almost like a not a mirror image, but like in a way, we bear similarities, right? In a large sense, we're a diaspora people with a lot of influence. And so Ireland being deeply anti-Zionist is a big deal. Also, the fact that for whatever reason, I don't know, there is a soft anti-Zionist approach from the government across all parties, the mainstream parties, who are wrong on a lot, and they don't take a hardcore stance against Israel, but they do somewhat, in a rare instance, seem to sort of represent the majority sentiment on this matter. And so you have soft anti-Zionism at the top, condemning the worst crimes, famine, genocide, bombing civilians, illegal settlements and all of that. And then just among the population, you have a fervent anti-Zionist sentiment. It's people who are sort of politically neutral generally just go, well, yeah, Israel are the bad guys and they should stop killing babies. That's sort of like your starting point. And then you have this very culturally powerful, call it left, in Ireland, which has made it their sort of big issue. So I'm just enjoying your commentary there, lads. But 2 secs there now. There we go. But yeah, so I'm trying to, like, some of you will kind of know this already, but I'm just trying to explain it from first principles. It's not going to not be picked up on by Israel and Israel's sort of arguable vassal state of America, or like it's Gollum in a sense, because America does act like hand in glove. What's the one? Yeah, with Israel. So you're not, that's just not going to not be picked up on, right? And if you have that, what you're going to look for is a cultural or political faction within Ireland who you can, without coming in being, hey, we're all Jewish, hey, we're all Zionist, we're all waving Stars of David and Israeli flags. Because of course, for one, the Jewish population in Ireland is a few thousand, right? Very small, of actually living in Ireland. And two, because anti-Zionist sentiment is so strong in Ireland that you can't just sort of meet it head on. You can't just go around waving Israeli flags. It's just not going to fly. Someone says, lovely beard. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate the compliments, the boost. But, you know, that's not going to fly under any circumstances. So, of course, what you want to do is find a sort of political vehicle that you can sort of hop in with. You hop in the back seat, you hop in the sidecar, hop in the boot, whatever, that you can plausibly sort of present yourself through and present your arguments through. The argument could be wrapped in something else. It could be wrapped in two things. It could be wrapped in layers, but that you can plausibly insert your agenda to sort of signal jam, not to take over the country and make you, I keep using the word hegemonic, sorry, but not to make your own perspective hegemonic, so that Ireland, by which I mean Ireland, will become a pro-Zionist holdout on the Atlantic. No, you're not looking for that. You're looking to signal jam the pro-Palestinian unanimity across the population, right? You're looking to have a signal jam to sort of create a partisanship or a signal jam within that system politically. You want a bridgehead from which to make your argument, make your cause, cancel your enemies, create a legitimate looking vehicle from which your interests can be represented and the interests of your perceived enemies can be pushed back on. And of course, you'll know where obviously I'm going with this, which is that that vehicle is clearly, if you have any brain cells, it's obvious that that vehicle is what you would call the Irish right-wing nationalist populist, whatever you want to call it, anti-immigration, anti-Islamic takeover, building mosques, chanting Sharia or whatever it is, right, out of minarets, disturbing neighborhoods, Bradford, you know, Brussels, that type of thing, like the as Morgoth called it, the rising liquid biomass of just immigration, the fact that it's just immigrants everywhere, you're being priced out of houses, you feel alienated wherever you go. And it's not even a particular, it's Brazilians, it's Indians, it's no particular thing. It's just a lot of immigrants. And it's not just the immigrants disliking them. It's that, you know, the numbers are rising every day. Everybody's against it. You're powerless politically. You feel like you're in this non-polity, and your living standards are dropping radically. Ours are going closer to India, not the other way around, right? And there's naturally going to be a resentment against that and a pushback against that. I've spoken about this stuff myself for years. It's obviously someone says slop migration. Yeah. It's obviously a legitimate, natural thing for a population to push back on. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're tribes people in the Amazon, whether you're Irish people, whether you're Russians or Chinese or anything. It's human nature. It's anti-human nature for this thing to be happening. It's anti-democratic. It makes no sense technocratically. It's just bad, right, for the majority. And so you're going to have to push back on that, which I myself am passionately involved in. And then, of course, I mean, that's where you slide it in, because that group is naturally at loggerheads with what you would call like the universalist, leftist, open borders people, the regime itself, the Gombines, the Fine Gael, you name it. Young people who have been brainwashed to think that being against mass immigration is equivalent to like hating some random foreign person just because or whatever. So you end up with this partisanship that's sort of put there. And I'm so against partisanship, I don't see the need at all. You know, common sense should prevail on this totally. Immigration, I've always advocated for being able to sit down with a reasonable so-called left-wing person, a black person from Blanchardstown, bring them all in. We'll have a fun podcast. We'll be at loggerheads. We'll talk. We'll shake hands. We'll hang out. And we'll talk about it. You talk about your African identity when in Ireland. What's that like, right? And then you'll talk about, oh, am I racist or something? Well, let me give my point of view, right? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you feel about your home country where you're from, how I feel about mine, and la, la, la. And I think there's actually a lot of room, in spite of everything, for common sense to be made. But no, it's always turned into this partisan. It's strongly partisan. Nobody talks to anybody. Everything is censored. It's just a pity. And so we're at that point. And of course, then you end up with the vehicle for a version of Zionist advocacy within Ireland. So I'd love to just sit here and read the chat, because I know this is kind of a not provocative, but it's sort of, gets people have their I didn't mean to highlight that one. People have their views. Maybe I'll try and start TLDRing this. So I wrote about this 3 years ago, right? I said international Zionism declares war on Ireland, and I sort of gave a preliminary view of mine on this years ago. And it's one of the 3 things I've written about, I think, in the last 5 years. One was about a satire about Dalkey. Dalkey is dangerously white. It was a joke, right? But I thought it was raising a legitimate point. The other one was on how China don't take immigrants, and it went through a full detailing of all that and why that's an important argument from my point of view. An insanely underrated argument and crucial to representing our view. It's an absolute kill shot, and I just thought it had to be talked about and was underrated. The other one was about, as I called it, international Zionism declares war on Ireland, about the motive for Israeli, Zionist, American, whatever, that entity to hijack and sort of weasel its way into Irish right-wing nationalist populist politics and sort of use it as a vehicle, and why that's not a good thing, how it might work, and all of that. I've only written 3 things like that. I don't just sit down, as much as I sometimes would want to, or say I would want to, write an article every week. I don't kind of do that, because I don't think asking someone to read through a long Substack just because I'm going to shit out the latest thing I thought of is necessarily worth it, right? It's not quite me. So I write when I think it matters. And this is one of the things I think matters hugely, because it is a litmus test for a nationalist movement that is being dragged into the wrong things, as opposed to one that's staying independent and is not integrating itself into Fox News slop, that sort of thing, not becoming a minstrel show caricature of nationalism, much like the Tommy Robinson stuff, where anti-immigration sentiment, a lot of it was to do with Muslims and Islam and the Iraq war and all of that, obviously Lee Rigby and the rest of it. But ultimately, much like Brexit, the sentiment that fueled Tommy Robinson's movement, I say like Brexit, because Brexit was ostensibly about trade deals with Europe and all of this. But everybody knows that the vote was a proxy anti-immigration vote. And same with the Tommy Robinson thing. Much as it was about Islam, the motivation among the white native English population there was nativism, not liking all the change. It wasn't just about Muslims. It would have been about every Indian, Brazilian, you name it. Just too many immigrants coming in. We don't like it, etc. And it became, for one, obviously weaponized by Zionists heavily, right? A sort of influence op. And 2, it became a sort of caricature, like a gaudy caricature. And this is one of the telltale signs, in my view. A gaudy caricature of what an English nationalism would look like, which is a bunch of Waynes in, and God bless the English, they can have their identity, their George's flag and all that. I'm not against English people having their identity in their own country, but a sort of loutish looking hooligan nationalism, like something that a Hollywood scriptwriter came up with, writing what English nationalism would look like. They're using it for their own end, but because they have a hostile, cartoonish view, a sort of apathy, like a disliking view of these people that they're using, they almost write it to be the most gaudy, cartoonish thing. And I feel like I'm seeing a bit of that in Ireland with like, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in specific. I don't read people's minds. Some people just like a certain aesthetic, or that's, God bless them. I'm just, as a general observation, and my opinion would be, you know, this sort of éiRe, shamrock. I'm a guy with a beard, and I am a guy with a beard, right? I'm a guy with a beard. I have a shamrock. I'm saying, and again, if anyone does any of these things and you're a good fella, fair play to you, right? That's your view. And you might be totally full of integrity and have no influence up working on you. God bless you. But just generally, being this sort of like éiRe Gabra, I've never in my life, right? I'm all for a Gaelic revival, but I've never in my life heard really anyone say éiRe Gabra besides a Yank. The last time I heard, if you said éiRe Gabra to me 5 years ago, who says that? I'd say a Yank in beige khakis, rich guy in Killarney, and he's met one of the like tribes people in a loincloth, i.e. me, in a pub or something. And he's like, wow, I'm here, guys. I'm here in my grandpappy's, whatever. And he's like all, you know, highfalutin and delighted with himself. And much like you would do with tribes people, you go, what's they're saying? What can I say that they like, you know? And you say, ooga booga woo, or whatever. And they go, oh, funny. Much like that, the Yank will say, éiRe Gabra, and you're sort of left going, cool. Thanks, you know, great. We never say that to ourselves, like, necessarily. Maybe I'm wrong, correct me, but like éiRe Gabra, shamrock plastic hat on. I don't know, there's just something about it that if I were PRing for nationalism in Ireland, trying to appeal, of course, to the young demographic, which you have to, trying to be cool, trying to be sophisticated looking. You're wearing your tricolour with pride and all that, but you wouldn't go balls to the wall on some sort of plastic caricature of Irishness, because you know that most people in general will just kind of go, something about that just feels a bit off to me. It just feels a bit weird. It feels a bit inorganic. And that whole like movement a little bit, most people involved, most people waving a tricolour, I'll wave a tricolour all day long, but you can see how that's a sort of a breeding ground, or possibly created or stoked on by, you know, influence ops, let's just say. And when you have Ezra Levant and GB News and The Telegraph and all of that coming along, trying to drum up conversation about, oh, Sinn Féin are traitors, and they are, and the Paddystinians, and Trump is going to rip the pharmaceutical industry out of Ireland if we don't drop the Occupied Territories Bill, don't you know, right? These sort of talking points coming out, it reeks to me of that influence. And I predicted it years ago, before anything, said this is an obvious entry point for them. They will obviously have a desire to get into this, much like you have Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. You have Jair Bolsonaro, Javier Milei in Argentina. Who else? Viktor Orban to some extent, and he's pretty good, but he's very pro-Zionist and the rest of it. They do tend to wed themselves to these movements, which is one thing in Hungary. I don't know what their internal politics is, but in Ireland, that is a dead weight on your leg, dragging you down to the bottom of the ocean politically. If you were just looking at politics in Ireland objectively, internally, our own thing, you would say, well, why would you be, like, the last thing you would want to be doing is going out saying, Israel has a right to exist, and blah, 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 trotting out their propaganda talking points and harping on it, because, of course, not just within the right, but across the board, people would say this is just some shill yank movement, basically, and it's totally inorganic to us, and it's totally unpopular, and it looks totally uncool, and you're just driving support away from yourself. And then they question that arises is, well, why would you do that? If you're just an Irish nationalist, why would you have any association to that at all? I don't know if you're with me. Stay with me, right? I see. This is why I'd almost love to just speak to someone of a like mind on this to sort of, hash it out. But it's just, I have a lot of tabs and stuff I was going to look at. I don't know. So anyway, returning to a previous point I made is that you can't come in with Israeli flags and Zionist talking points on the nose, so to speak, right? Because that's not going to fly. The right wing, people like me and others, will be immediately suspicious of that and just say that's bullshit, call it out, and the general population will be completely repulsed by that, not like it. So if I were a Zionist and I said, what are we going to do with Ireland, this prickly pear that is stridently the most anti-Zionist Western country, we have to do something about this place because they have influence. Their various UN councils, the UN, just their brand recognition generally carries a lot of weight. You have kneecap running around, you have this, that, and the other. We need to get it in. Like my essay a few years ago when I wrote about it, what I was saying effectively is that they're either going to try and co-opt and weaponize or use this as a vehicle. And if they don't, they're totally dumb. Because if I can see it, they surely can see it. And if they don't, they're totally stupid. Now, Zionist influence ops are not known for being stupid, not known for being unsavvy politically and extremely unsophisticated. Or, like, to put it another way, they are extremely sophisticated at this stuff. Maybe the best in the world, bar none, at this stuff. Look at Trump, look at Biden's cabinet, look at what they're able to pull off through sort of inserting themselves into domestic politics of other countries and riding the wave of populist sentiment, the sort of counterpoint, the right wing, the reaction to the mainstream thing, like with Javier Milei in Argentina. Just look him up. So if they are what they are, and I'm able to notice it a mile away, and as are others, years in advance, are they not going to be picking up on that? And they have almost unlimited resources, basically, right? And they're completely tribed up and connected with the most powerful people, non-Jewish, non-Zionist people in Western countries. They're connected up with the highest levels through their organizations, networks, and all of that. They have an outsized impact compared to their population, heavily outsized, right? That's just a fact. So with all that said, are they not going to look at this juicy opportunity? Ireland is a prickly pear, and here we have this juicy opportunity, a undervalued property. Irish nationalism, because of its inchoate nature, because of its organic nature, it's sort of huge in potential, it's huge in energy, but it doesn't have leaders, it's rudderless, it's open season. And they're oppressed, and any little bit of power, any bit of exposure, any bit of connection, say, why don't we get together? I agree with you. Any form of influence will be easy to shove in there for in a way. Why would they not take that? Now, the second question then becomes, okay, so if they're going to take it, if it's ripe for the taking and they are going to take it, how are they going to take it? Are they going to show up with Ezra Levant saying, bleating on and on and on about Israel and Palestine and handing out Zionist Israeli flags to people to wave around? No, it's just not going to fly. Because they are sophisticated and savvy, they understand that you need to meet the situation where it can, like, meet it where they can, if that makes sense, right? You can't go too far. You have to get in there and form a little bridgehead and sort of expand your influence. That's how I would do it. I consider myself sophisticated enough on this stuff. That's what you would do. And so what does that look like? Like I say, it can't be too much. It can't be too much. So what do you do with this country that is stridently anti-Zionist, pro-Palestine across the board, within the left wing, far left, whatever, within the general population, even within a large segment, maybe half, whatever, of even the right-wing nationalist thing, like me and you probably are hip to it as well. So you have to be very conservative in your approach. Very conservative, very restrained. We can't make Ireland pro-Zionist, but could we make it anti-pro-Palestinian? I think that's a simple point, right? Can we make it anti-pro-Palestinian, or can we make it less pro-Palestinian? Can we tone it down? Can we reduce it? Can we jam that signal? Can we get in there and turn it into a non-foregone conclusion? If I were a Jewish Zionist or Atlanticist or whatever, that's what I would aim for. I'd say we'll start there. We'll break the signal, right? Mildly, we'll get in there, find a point and break the signal, because where else are we going to do it? We are not going to go to the Irish Farmers Association or to the Knitting Association of Ireland. We're not going to go to the atheist, although they probably have gone to them, the vegan society, this, that, some sort of political grouping. First off, those are too weak and obscure and, in a sense, not culturally relevant. And B, that's just not a vehicle. So they're going to go to the nationalist movement, per se, and take that view. We need to turn Israel, or we need to turn it into a partisan issue. And where can we do that? You're not going to take the far left and Fine Gael, and then more importantly, because that's a caricature, just 70, 80, God knows what percent, the vast majority of the Irish population, who are just in some form or another think the Israelis are the bad guys. And they say, yeah, I do support the Palestinians, for sure. We're not going to counter them with the IFA or the Vegan Society, or waving Zionist flags ourselves as the Jewish Society of Ireland. There'll be 10 of us standing there getting like berated, right? That's not going to work. So there's your vehicle. And then what is our tone? What approach, what angle are we taking? We're not going to get a bunch of nationalists running around with Zionist flags. That's not going to fly. That'll look ridiculous. So we'll just get them hopped up on this idea that the Palestine flag is the flag of leftists. It's the flag of immigration replacement. It's the flag of degeneracy. It's all this kind of stuff. And the Irish flag is, it's sort of like, in a way, the ultimate goal, I would say, speculatively, would be 20,000 Irish nationalists who want immigration stopped and they don't want kids being taught about becoming transgender and all of that, carrying Irish flags, totally legitimate view, organic, the people and all of that. Them with their Irish flags. And then on the other side, what we want to have is maybe 2,000 sort of leftist, degenerate, unlikable people all carrying Palestine flags. And now we have, if I were Ezra Levant or Harvey Weinstein or whoever it is, right? Or David Quinn, you know, whether Jewish or not, Zionist or just an Anglo-American Atlanticist, people who want to break the Palestine thing in Ireland. If I saw that Irish flags demo and Palestinian flags on the other side, I would go, this is beautiful. We had a hopeless scenario, an island that is almost universally anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian. And we found in that smoking ruin of a mess, barren landscape, we have found a plum opportunity. That's what it is. I mean, someone could say, where's your evidence for all this? And the problem is, this is the reason I don't like talking about this. I can be accused from so many angles. One, are you a schizo? You just don't like Jews and you're obsessed with that, or something like that, right? You love Muslims, you're a leftist, whatever, you don't want to be successful, you're being contrarian or whatever, right? There's so many sort of spurious nonsense accusations that can be thrown at you. And there are so many people within the right-wing milieu who are, to one extent or another, sort of in that influence op, consciously or otherwise. And so they can throw that at you. And they can also say, well, the Palestine flag and the Palestinian movement at its fringe, at its like most strident, the sort of activist groups in Dublin and elsewhere, Cork, they are despicable. They are pro-migration. They hate us and all that. And it's hard because I'm going, well, look, that's true. But of course, that wing, that extreme element, they're for a lot of things. You know, they're for not throwing plastic bottles in the rivers. Look, I'm for that too. You know, so like not everything they're for, or some very obnoxious person is for, not everything they're for, I'm against either. So, you know, you end up with a ton of things to defend. You very rarely will you have like a smoking gun. So it looks like you have some big theory built up, but there's no evidence. But for anyone who's familiar with this stuff, of course, there's loads of circumstantial evidence, motive, precedent, all the rest of it is there. And it's a difficult thing. And I've been waiting for it. I've been waiting for anti-pro-Palestinian stuff to become some sort of wedge issue that nationalists or populists or whatever in Ireland start getting a little bit too into. The corollary of this too is that it's a way of, if you don't want your movement to become Tommy Robinson and the Hooligans or some like, you know, éiRe Gabra, plastic paddy hat or whatever, if you want it to be sophisticated, if you want it to be both unapologetic, not PC, none of that stuff, but you also want to reach out to, let's call it normal people or the average person. If you want to reach out to that sort of trendy person who sort of goes to a kneecap gig because it's cool and they're 24 and they're on TikTok or whatever, and you want to make and you must, this is why it's important at the end, it's not just about having an aversion to Zionists or something. If you want to reach them, you have to do everything you can. You have to somehow get to them and say, we're against immigration. We don't wake up in the morning trying to hate people. We're also not going to apologize for it. We're also not going to sugarcoat it, but we're normal, actually. This is completely justified. That's why I take China as an example, right? Globally, historically, it's totally justified. We are the ones being attacked here, basically, right? And we deserve to have a country and all the rest of it. And you effectively red pill those people. You can do it. It is possible. But of course, then you have to be saying, well, we're against immigration. We're against teaching children to be transgender and all that. But you would think politically, without external motivations, you would say, well, yeah, you're going to look at something like environmentalism. You're not going to come out and become like, go over the top on like, well, I think we should just be fuck the environment. You know, you don't want to say that. Oh, well, the lefties are for the environment and I'm going to say fuck the environment. The lefties are anti-capitalist, so I'm going to defend Dennis O'Brien and whoever else. Their right to private property and la la la. Obviously, you want to break that cycle, that thing that has plagued American right-wing politics forever, and British and others. You want to be unique. You want to be hybrid. You want to say, no, I am to some extent, where it's pragmatic, anti-capitalist, anti-international finance capitalism. I'm pro the environment in a lot of ways. I don't think we should tax poor people to stop the world getting hotter or whatever. I think that's nonsense. But I'm for the environment. I'm against ploughing the landscape, you know, to pave over with concrete and this and that and the other. You name it. You name the issue. You should be looking at it and saying, okay, where are where's the general consensus? We don't like Cuilche. And I know it sounds cynical, but this is politics, right? I'm against Cuilche and what they're doing with Sitka spruce for sure at a real level. But the cynical politics in me also, as it happens, says, well, even if I was ambivalent, I think the cool political point of view would be to say, no, we don't want the Sitka spruce. We don't want this. It's in fact, it's parallel to immigration. It's like a mirror image. You're commodifying and industrializing and denationalizing these living things for profit, and it's harmful to the nation, to the landscape, to the environment. It's actually one for one with immigration in a way, right? It's humans and not trees. But even if you, let's say, don't care, you're saying, well, don't really think about trees. I don't really care, to be honest. It's not my gig. Well, as a political person, you would, if you are politically motivated, and that is your game. Trees isn't your game, but politics is. Well, you would study it and say, I'm against Quilta and what they're doing and this, and we need to reintroduce the Pine Martin and the this and the that. And that all sounds great, right? Everybody loves that. So we're going with that. And same with the Palestine thing. You might say, well, I mean, it's almost universal in Ireland. It doesn't have to be the crazy blue-haired transgender lunatic from Trinity saying free Palestine and all of that, and also transgender 8-year-olds. That's only a caricature, because the majority of the population, whether it's just cool young Zoomers in their Subaru Imprezas driving around Monaghan, or whether it's, you know, whatever, like whoever across the board, basically, the thing is, whether it's kneecap, and even before we don't like kneecap, fine, but just in general across the board, the cultural ascendant hegemonic view is, yeah, free Palestine, stop killing kids, stop starving children. They're just like us. We're Irish and we were starved out and oppressed, and they tried to vanish us from our land and all the rest of it. So that totally maps onto Israel and Palestine. Also, the Israelis are what do you call it, Zionist or Jewish or whatever. The Israelis, Zionists, have an undue influence in America, and left and dissident right will agree on this, right? And they're sort of playing games with politics and all of this. So we reject that. We reject the bullshit. We reject the censorship. We reject the control. And that whole message is ascendant and strong. You could even talk about the Kanye album, right? And that's a whole other thing, another thing people will attack me on. But, you know, like, what do you call it? Anti-Semitic, which I reject. You should be able to be critical of all groups if you want to be, right? The anti-Zionist, or like, not even, I don't want to say anti-Semitic, but just rejecting the accusation of anti-Semitism, rejecting the berating about the World War II stuff, rejecting that whole mental framework. That actually, at the moment, the rejection of that from the trendy, cool, ascendant, young but not exclusively so, right-wing and left-wing movements is almost becoming indecipherable. The right-wingers always said, well, I'm not afraid to say that it's not strictly Zionist and it's not this. It is a bit of a Jewish thing, and la, 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 la. And I don't buy into all the narratives and all the bullshit, right? I don't buy into all that. And then the left-wingers would be stridently anti-Zionist, but just strictly Zionist. But I'm not saying anything, and they're still caught up in that we're supposed to be anti-racist matrix and all of that. So you can't just say things as they are. At the moment, you're seeing that break down, and I wish I could find an example. There's one I had here. I mean, it's a bit risque or a bit politically incorrect, but it was basically, there's this meme, right? And I'll be cryptic because I don't want YouTube to bother me. There was this meme on TikTok where people were joking, talking about, I can't, the format is hard to sort of reiterate here, but something about, they're talking about 6 million, right? 6 million watts, let's not worry about it. They're talking about 6 million, and the meme all over TikTok, American, Irish, everywhere, is people are saying 6 million, I think it's more like 271,000. And they could say they're talking about cookies, they could say they're talking about car imports, whatever. But that's the joke. They're using those numbers, and we all know what that's referring to. And it's a historical revisionism, and it's funny, and it's, it's bowled or whatever, right? And I'm seeing that there's some guy on his TikTok saying, oh, me, when I found out Jewish studies is on the junior cert curriculum. So we're talking about like 14-year-olds here. And then all the comments are like joking, saying, I needed 6 million points, but I'm only going to get 271,000. And they're all laughing emojis. They're just having fun, right? It's not a big, oh, you're not supposed to say this. They're just having fun. They're rejecting the control, right? The fact that you cannot criticize this one group. You seem to be able to criticize everyone. Go on X and see how much Indians are criticized, how much Muslims, black people, white people criticized all over the shop, right? The last sort of standing thing, obviously, is Jews, Zionists, Israel, and all that. That's pretty much the biggest one, effectively. All other groups sort of, like, in terms of the intersectional hierarchy, that's like the final boss, right? And so when you throw off the final boss, you're throwing off all the smaller bosses too. You're just rejecting the whole thing. And when I say lefties, I mean like hardcore lefties, like weirdos, but then also just people who are like normal. Like I said, the lad in Monaghan driving a Subaru Impreza and he's 19 or whatever. He's not like that, but he's sort of in that, like, world of pop culture or just whatever's going. He might go to a kneecap gig, but he's not some lefty or whatever. He's just, a normal young fella. If he is writing on his TikTok, or some 14-year-old Irish kid, they're not part of the dissident right, and they're not following this, and they don't have all the, they don't have tattoos of things, and they're not some sort of, caricature. These are just normal kids, and they're having fun off stuff that was only on 4chan 10 years ago, the depths of an internet forum back in the day. And now it's just the same people who say free Palestine, they're normal, they're whatever. It's become culturally normal to push back on that thing. And then you have the Yay song coming out. And again, people who are singing that song, right, they're not going, I read all the books from 1930s Germany. I'm an ardent political this and that and the other. It's not. It's just about the fuck you. It's just about the freedom of it. The freedom to just say the song, right? And it's a fun, positive thing in a strange kind of way. People and the idea that someone says, no, it's very insensitive and dangerous and all this. And it's people saying, fuck off with all of that. I'm having fun with it. And I'm not, if I'm not going to be scolded on anti-Semitism, then I'm also not going to be scolded on racism or sexism or any of this. Let's just stop. And that's where the conversation then begins. If we've gotten over that, if we've sung the Kanye song, we've had some fun, and we're doing the 271,000 memes on TikTok, and that's normal, even in the broadly leftish kind of trendy right-on circles of young people, well, then we've thrown it all off now. And the difference between the 4chan right-winger, dissident right, politically incorrect, and the lad doing his junior cert in Monaghan has melted away. And so the advantage there, and it's not just about Jews or anti-Semitism. That's because once you've thrown that off, the ultimate boss, then you've thrown off all the, well, you're not going to be so sensitive about someone saying someone's racist or whatever either. Now the conversation can begin. We can talk about immigration. We can talk about who owns everything. We can talk about how the economy works, how everything works, because nothing we walk into can be controversial, because the most controversial thing apparently has been slain, right? That the shelf life of that cultural dominance, whatever it is, the Schindler's List and all that, has come to an end. It doesn't mean that we're waking up in the morning obsessed with these people or that people. It just means that we're not under some scolding regime anymore. And we can ask questions, and we can do this. And there's more room for coming together. And my point is, when that movement is coming about, the last thing you want to do as a dissident right nationalist populist in Ireland is basically turn heel and sprint in the opposite direction. Why would you do that, right? Why would you? I'm not saying dissident right people need to put on the keffiyeh and wave the flag and become all about it. No, you don't have to or whatever. I think a reasonable position, given all of what I've said, and there's more to say or whatever, a reasonable position would be, well, I'm not pro-Zionist. I'm not waving a Star of David or an Israeli flag. And I'm not, as people love to say, well, I'm neutral, I'm not involved. Well, if you're really neutral, then you won't go out of your way to sort of be anti-pro-Palestinian, will you? When all of the wind is at the back of the pro-Palestine, in fact, it's so co-optable from the left. If anything, if you're asking me, I would say do grab it and run, right? Pick the money off the street and pick it up and go, right? If it's just sitting there, nobody wants it. Don't, it's right there for the taking, right? Maybe a bad analogy, but why wouldn't you take it? And, it's, again, it's complicated, of course, but, and I've always just thought that was the litmus test for nationalism, because you could say, where's all this, like, someone might ask, Jews, Zionism, Palestine, like, why is that? Like, either way, whether people end up being this or that, anti-pro-Palestinian, whatever, like, who cares in a way? Like, it's not that big a deal either way. My view is that it is representative of everything, because that view, this issue, is something that the Atlanticist regime, all these forces who would want to turn right-wing Irish nationalism, populism, and have so many vectors to do it because there's so many activists and leaders, so-called, and all this stuff. We don't really know who they are, and we're put in that position by the circumstances. Would like to pull the strings on it and just turn it into a joke, because of course they don't need us to get so powerful that we take over the country and we change the culture and we do all of this kind of stuff, band together with the lefties, not the lefties, but like the people who think of themselves as like cool, young, whatever, actually blow that partisanship apart and just bring it all together, bring the best of everything kind of together, and have a sort of unified national movement. Well, yeah, you're going to have some opposition, but in a way, there's no reason for opposition. There's no like 50-50 partisanship. It's like, no, we can actually all agree on most of this stuff, I think. If you want to create that and not have it turned into a partisan shit show, sorry, the point I was making is that they don't need it to become this powerful, unified, national, independent, cutting edge, in a way, politically, a political movement where it's nationalism, but it's not just narrowly immigration with a bit of Zionism, with a bit of this kind of going nowhere, like where your person gets elected and nothing changes. It's actually deeply rooted. It's crossed the board now. You just have cultural unanimity in the country for the most part, with minor exception. And they don't necessarily need us to get to that point. They're happy if it's 20, 30,000 of us marching around Dublin, not quite getting anywhere, getting a TD here, a councillor there, whatever. They're happy. They need it to get big enough and useful enough to be able to drive home their point. And it isn't just Zionism, it could be this, it could be that. But to be a political vehicle, a ripe political vehicle for whatever the interest kind of is. And there could be loads of other little minor interests too. I can't think of them right now, but various billionaires and stuff like that can kind of nestle their sort of point of view into it. And it's well, this has happened for a long time. Loads of examples could be brought up, and not right now. But the one that they can't, my point is, this whole matrix of like the Atlanticist Zionist thing or whatever, the hegemonic like political force outside of our country, just across the space, all the way to like the borders of Russia, China, various other places. The system we're really under, we're not under Fine Gael government or whatever. We're under this bigger government, really, right? It's not a government, it's a political economic hegemony, really, right? So whether it's some big huge tech company, or whether it's organized Zionists, or whether it's this and that, it's made up of these groups, and they sort of run it behind the scenes. The one thing that they sort of can't, they can handle people being anti-immigration when it suits them. They can handle this, they can handle that. But in an Irish context, the thing that they really can't handle from their potential darling, which would be right-wing nationalism, populism, the one thing they really can't kind of handle or take is if we're going, and I'm not advocating everyone needs to have a Palestine flag or they're a traitor. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying theoretically, the one thing they cannot stomach is if we are at best actively pro-Palestine, co-opting it from the left, saying this isn't some issue of the transgender student union head or whatever. This is all of our issue. We represent that. In fact, you're tarnishing it by looking like a freak, right? Most people in Ireland who support Palestine are normal, and most people, because it's 70, 80, whatever percent, the vast majority of people in Ireland are to some extent or another pro-Palestine, and also the vast majority of people in Ireland are to some extent pro or anti-immigration. Well, the two, like mathematically, it's one and the same for the most part, right? So you should be saying, no, this weird transgender freak who's telling everyone what to do and what to believe and all these things that none of us want, you're tarnishing it, actually. In fact, you're like, a dodgy entity, really, because you're just tarnishing the reputation of the same with Paul Murphy, same with the rest of them. This is an issue for the Irish people, actually, not some weird fringe thing that you get to co-opt and make a show of, which is what's happening. At best, you would take that position and ride the tiger, right? Wonderful. At worst, you would say, well, I'm definitely not going to be the partisan bulwark against it. I'm not going to be going out saying, oh, look, it's the Paddystinians again. Oh, that flag is the flag of treason. Let's take it down and burn it and stomp on it and make a big show and DM it to Ezra Levant, and he'll get 40,000 retweets in America with boomers there or whatever. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, that's wonderful if that's what you want. But if you want to drive and expand the politics of opposing immigration, opposing replacement, opposing international finance and all that stuff. Well, because it's so complex, and this is a sub point, it is so complex. I don't know, you don't know, but we can to some extent surmise what we don't know. 50 years ago, an influence op, a high level influence op from the top, from the American government, from the CIA, Iran Contra, this, that, the other, right? These ops would have been highly sophisticated, very hard at the time for people to find smoking guns, very hard to oppose, especially if you don't have a sovereign regime like a Ayatollah or this or that or whatever. If you have this open space, so-called democracy, very hard for anyone to know what's really going on, what's driving it all, who's who, what's what. Are you a Fed? Are you a Fed? Is this real? Is that real? Is everything we're seeing online sort of nudging us in a certain direction? It's very hard to know what's going on and how to push back on it. I can't go around and interrogate everybody, read their minds, say, he's a traitor, he's a Fed, he isn't, he's cool. That's for the birds, right? But because Free Palestine, or at least refusing to be anti-Palestine or sort of anti-pro-Palestinian, that the regime, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, in an Irish context, it cannot integrate that. They can't integrate it. So it's almost like an allergic reaction. It's almost like having something in your hand that if the whale swallows you down, it's going to have to belch you back out, because they just can't do that, right? They can't have it. They could sooner have, I believe, they would sooner have in Ireland allow the right-wing nationalist populist thing to have sort of bowled imagery related to World War II and all this kind of stuff, right? And they don't obviously like that either. But I think they would sooner have that, much like they do in Ukraine with the Azovs and all that. They would sooner tolerate that, even though ostensibly it's against their motives, than they would tolerate Free Palestine in Ireland, because Free Palestine integrates everyone in Ireland for the most part. It would integrate left and right. It's a huge opportunity, open goal, to integrate, to pull people over from the sort of nominal left. And of course, then if the Irish right wing, or whatever you want to call it, were stridently either pro-Palestinian or being like, I'm definitely not opposing people with Palestine flags. That's not my issue. At best, I'm agnostic, and fair play to them. Let them enjoy it. I'm not a partisan counterculture to that. That's not my gig, right? If the Irish right wing is that, then they sort of have nowhere to go. Where do you go after that, right? What you have like the Irish Chamber of Commerce come out and say, we need to stop being so harsh on Israel. These Paddystinians are gone crazy. Who's going to say it? Dennis O'Brien? Who? Nobody. You're out of road at that point. So it's actually something that they very much can't tolerate. Whereas they could tolerate people being really edgy, really bowled, using historical images or whatever. They could almost let people off the leash for that, because that serves the purpose in a sense. Because it's like, yeah, well, it's not great politically, but, you know, 10% of people will like it and go with it, and it'll be dissident, and that'll be fine. That'll serve the purpose. Because if we have 10% of people who are going around like just itching to stomp on Palestinian flags and make a big deal of it and all that, well, that serves diplomatically, that serves the purpose, right? You have a sea of tricolors, a smaller sea of Palestinian flags, and they're all transgender or something like that. And that's a perfect, that is a beautiful left-right spectrum. We love it, right? But of course, it has people who support Palestine on the nominal left. I'm kind of weirded out by the like crusty fringe political movement supporting Palestine, and then they also sort of go, well, I don't want to be running around with Ezra Levant and like a shamrock on my face saying éiRe Gabra and saying fuck Palestine. And, you know, I've heard people, some actors within the nationalist so-called right and all that, being like, oh, drown them, throw them into the sea, this kind of stuff about Palestinians. And it's just like, whatever you feel about that morally, I think that's bad. But put that aside, that's just politically toxic within Ireland, right? And again, you could say, well, you know, the Palestine flag getting painted over by the tricolour in Mount Misery and Waterford, that's not politically toxic, because a lot of people support that. A lot of people say, oh, I'm so sick of these lefties and all that. Yeah, I get that. And that's a kind of a fair point. I'll just grant that. The problem is that the people who like that are the people who totally already agree with you, right? There's a certain percent in Ireland, 10%, I don't know, who are like all about it. Like they're online all day, they support Carrickmacross and they support Bundoran and all the rest of it. And within that group, a minority of them will be moralized by kicking a Palestinian flag or whatever. Great, but you've lost you're working against the huge mass of other people who were right there to be taken. They kind of go, well, I kind of support Palestine, to be honest. Like, yeah, I don't like the weirdos traipsing around with the flag so much. It's kind of like an opposite of the tricolour. I don't like that. But I don't know, cynical, like kicking a Palestinian flag or saying fuck them into the sea or whatever is it would kind of put them off. It's kind of not, they just don't like it. So why would you inject that into our politics? I just have no idea. It's one thing to say I'm neutral on it. Hey, I'm not pro-Israel. I'm not like massively pro-Palestine. It's none of my business or whatever. None of my business. I think that's different than going around trying to find a Palestinian flag somewhere or someone saying free Palestine and like jeering at them and go, fuck you, or paint over, I'll burn it down or whatever. It's like there is a subtle difference there between all of that. I hope some of you see what I'm getting at with that. But I don't know. I've kind of rambled there a bit. The other aspect too, I mean, if someone wanted me, I wish it would almost be better if I could field questions. If there's anyone, this would be a great way. If there's anyone critical of my point of view who wants to challenge it, super chat me. So you could pay me and I'll answer questions. I would do it with the normal chat, but I don't know which one to pick out or whatever. Point being is that I would like to take, the easiest way would be to almost bat away the counter arguments, because I think I'm able for that, right? But like one of them would, and this is a supporting argument, the right-wing nationalist populist TM movement in Ireland has an inordinate amount of either like Jewish to a small extent, but otherwise friends of Israel, people who are all day long obsessed with Israel. Mark Humphreys, for example, I don't know is he Jewish or not, but his big issue, he's a patriot for Israel, more so than he is for Ireland, clearly, if you just judge by his Twitter account. Tweets pro-Zionist propaganda all day long, right? He's nominally, I used to follow his like counter jihad stuff or whatever. He's sort of like right wing presenting a bit or whatever. You have John McGurk. Here's just another way of putting it. Who were traditionally over the last like 10, 20 years, who were like the three main people who could present on Irish television the conservative, Catholic, right-wing populist, whatever you want to call it, issue of the day. Currently it's immigration, obviously. Who were the three people you could get on telly? I've been talking away. I'm not going on telly. I'm not being asked. I'm not being allowed. They wouldn't be nice to me if I was on. They'd say, you tweeted this once, and they'd hang me or whatever. But like, in order to be a legitimate person who comes on and comments, historically, it's been John McGurk, David Quinn, Ian Doherty. I think I'm fair. I'm not just pulling them out because it suits my argument. I think it's fair to say. You've Maria Steen, a few others, but I think three of them in terms of column inches and television appearances and mainstream sort of like they've been presented as acceptable and legitimate. I think three of them are a unbiased selection, right? Three of them are ardently pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. They've taken the trip to Israel. They're this, that, and the other. That's weird, right? The only way I can say it is it's kind of strange. Because most right-wing people, most pro-life people or whatever, they're not like inherently, ardently wake up every day, make the argument for Israel. They're not, so like, what is that about? It's just like mathematically doesn't make sense. You've loads. You have at the moment you have like people, you've this Rachel Moiselle character, right, on Twitter. You've Karen Levers, Big House Karen, also known as, right? One I think is Jewish descended, the other it's ambiguous. I'm not going to go around trying to like identify people, but they're obviously hardcore Zionist, right? Let's just put it that way, and have strong connections with Israeli Zionist stuff, whether being Jewish or not, or to some extent or another, right? That's what's going on. You have this Karen Levers, Big House Karen, who's a caricature in Ireland. This Big House Karen, she came out opposing the Wolf Tones playing at Electric Picnic because she opposed Republican sentiment or something like that, right? Thought it was like not politically correct and bad and terrible terrorism or whatever. Obviously, most Irish people, especially young people, will be like, that's just vile. I mean, and she lives in a big house it was perfect. Couldn't write it, right? And now she's coming out like, for every 4 tweets that are like, oh my God, they're coming at Israel, they're attacking Israel, Israel has a right to exist, la la la. Then she'll have one of saying, Ireland needs to take back control of its borders and this and that and the other. To me, it seems quite cynical. You've loads of these little actors around the place. I'll try and find some more. Let's just say you name it, right? You have, as I mentioned a while ago, you have Ezra Levant showing up. You have the Telegraph, right? The guy writing there, Michael Murphy, sound enough, seems good, cogent writer, on the money. I'm not saying like he's necessarily like on an agenda. He just writes articles for his publication. I don't know. But look, let's be real. These things will be they'll be talking about, oh, Ireland is the last man to the party to pick up on the fact that immigration is dead in Europe and it's not popular anymore. La la la. You go, great, wonderful. Foreign coverage. It's good to have it be picked up abroad. That's always good, right? We don't get much play domestically. That's great. Then it starts talking about how, well, the occupied territories bill is bad. I hope Trump doesn't pull the pharmaceuticals. La la la. This kind of concern trolling. You're getting that from across the space a little bit. It's really just obvious. I mean, that it's the right wing is this vector. And just, I want, remind me of stuff there in the chat if you want. But yeah, Collison or whatever it is, Zio Tech Bro going for his jog in Israel, hanging out with all the, like, whoever they are, AI people, right? A lot of whom are Jewish Zionists. And they, of course, funded and set up this, what was it called? Progress Ireland, right? Which was, again, saying the same thing. And I spotted it straight away. Just take a bit of credit for that. I sniffed it out straight away as being just off, right? I don't know if that's a good heuristic, but I'll go with it. That Progress Ireland was saying, well, we need to fix everything and we need to be bold and bright and not be stodgy boomers. Let's all be like technocratic and positive and interesting and, forward thinking. Progress Ireland. And so it's going to be, we build sheds in people's mums' back gardens and you can move in there while the Indians get the houses or whatever, right? We need to shred planning laws, which I'm not in support of. I want there to be more houses in Ireland so that the prices come down, but I don't want to just have a ton of immigration and then up the supply a bit. The prices basically don't change because the immigration is elastic. The demand is elastic. It can just rise. Like if the prices come down, that'll just be an extra pull factor or less of a push away factor. And it just have more immigrants. It doesn't make sense, right? So I'm against that. It's like, well, no, until you're going to restrict immigration, I don't want you to bulldoze through sensible planning laws and actually restrictions on the terraforming of the country for foreigners. So I kind of, like, in isolation, supply would be good or whatever, but without an immigration point, I don't want it, right? I'm like, no, I actually like sanding the gears, to be honest. As much as that might sound odd, it makes sense. And you have to address demand, which is addressing immigration. They weren't doing that. They're saying, build a flat in your granny's back garden. We'll call them Shomri. Very progressive, very modular, very interesting, very new, and all of that. But the key thing about it was that they had little runners for them, people who were showing up to their meetings who are sort of broadly associated with what you would call dissident right in Ireland, which was interesting, dressing up like trad cats, prim and proper, going in being like, we're so back, based, I'm at the thing here, I'm with fucking Sean Keys or whatever. And I don't know these people, but like, they were using the language. It was very clearly a sort of a PR job. We'll sort of play footsie under the table with this like right-wing superficial rhetoric. But when you actually lifted up the bonnet, you just see Chamber of Commerce, IDA, like just bog basic shite, right? Total shite. And it was full of this sort of like tech bro, right-wing, musky sort of vibe. And yet I don't mind that if I can pull up the bonnet and there's a bit of substance there. Grand. I mean, where's the even mild mention of immigration? Nothing. Then you go to Collison and you see, immigration is anti-growth and blah, 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 blah. And he's cozied up to his Zionist friends. He's in Israel chatting to them, right? And they're talking about, I don't know if they're talking about it him, but hypothetically, Zionists, for the most part, are talking about, well, let's just fucking drive these Palestinians out. Let's clean the place up, get them over to Libya, into the sea or whatever. We'll pave it over and we'll build over it and we'll expand Greater Israel. Wonderful. Because we're the Jews, you know, we only marry each other and all this. And you have this little, like, gimp then in the corner, right? Because he's a billionaire, he thinks he's smart. He's sitting there being like, immigration is great for growth. And then he's setting up this think tank and funding this bullshit about Shomri. And it's just like something like that. You go, well, how does this connect back to Zionism? It's a bit of a loose connection. It's like, well, yeah, if something like that is trying to sort of weasel its way into the Irish right, and it's clearly not coming, it's not a tit for tat. There's actually nothing good coming out of it, but Shomri, right? Well, again, one of the repellents to that is Free Palestine. Well, we say Free Palestine. We're with some of the lefties on this one. We're with the fella in Monaghan with a Subaru Impreza. We're with the people on this one, actually. Or at least we're not against them. Same with GB News and Telegraph come over and they say, hey, we're here against the immigration. It's out of control. Fuck Sinn Féin, isn't it? Fuck Palestine. And if you go, well, no, actually, a lot of Sinn Féin voters are great and they've just been led astray or whatever. And I just think they should kind of stop killing babies over in Palestine, to be honest. And I think we share their struggle to some extent. They were replaced in the Nakba and a long time before it. It was replacement migration for decades, and the same is happening to us now. And to be honest, I think some of the same people are behind it, if we're being real, right? The GB News interviewer who's like, I'm here with the Irish. What are the Irish saying, right? He's going to be like, oh, shit, right? He's not going to like that. And that's the thing. That's the kind of opposite of a Faustian bargain. You have to reject the hype. And it's like, well, there's our hand to the drowning man, is relevant, and so are all giving us coverage. That's the insidious element of it, is that, and this is how I know, right, is that even when because I am sort of abrasive on these things, and I've been very particular on this. I didn't just come up with this now. I wrote the Zionism article years ago that sort of predicted this and sort of was like finger on the pulsing with this. Like, basically, this isn't a new idea for me, right? You know, it's one of these bargains that and not everybody's in a smoky room with someone offering you a bag of silver, right? That's not how it works. It can work like that, and probably does work like that in some cases. But in other ways, the influence up certainly starts at the top with nefarious actors. I'm not going to say John McGurk or David Quinn. I don't mind Reid, right? But you have people in positions of sort of thrown into these like constant positions of influence, given the TV access and the this and the that. You have Ganley, and you name it, right? Who supports a certain brand of right-wingism, and when he wants to, he'll oppose the asylum industry and the rest of it. And you have the various other institutions and whatever, and they take the view. They either take the view, or it's their vested interest, or whatever is going on. Like, but that's the view, is like a sort of an anti-Palestinian, pro-immigrant or pro-Israel thing. And then you've Ezra Levant there giving you the coverage, and you've so-and-so who comes to you and says, hey, and I've had stuff like this. Hey, we want to like work with you. You know what I mean? It's not, hey, why don't you do Hasbara in Ireland, right? Against the Paddystinians, which is such an insulting, annoying term as well, by the way. Again, they can't help themselves. They frame the right in England as hooligan Egypts, right? And they frame the right in Ireland. They sort of seem to like sort of promote this like plastic paddy thing, where everyone looks like a bit of like, people are made to look a bit like Muppets. Like most Irish people of all ages will just be like éiRe go bra with a shamrock. This is weird, like, you know. And they will you know, like, they'll put you in the position of being not palatable to the public. I kind of lost where I was going with that, I'm going to be honest with you. But where was I? You swear I was stoned. It's just quarter past 12. Oh, it was a strand of thought, and I've lost it. I'm just going to have to pick up afresh. I'll sign up in the morning, do. Oh yeah, how the influence works. It just occurred to me. Sorry, it's just like a complex kind of thought or whatever. The influence works not by getting people into a room with a bag of silver, but just the influence trickles down. It's a trickle down effect, to put it basically, right? Is that what, again, I'll use the word hegemonic. A creeping, growing hegemonic mood is created where there's certain nodes of influence and certain nodes of power that come down from on top and whisper in the ear or suggest this or suggest that. And then they say it to someone and it influences someone else, right? And they didn't get a bag of silver, but they got opportunities. They got an opportunity that involves many things. And one of the things, unspoken, would be, well, definitely don't go out saying free Palestine. Like, I mean, you poison the well there, you know, like that's not, you know, one of the things is you do say this, you don't say that, and you do say this. And then for the rest of it, you can have your own point of view. You just stay away from them. It's not even said. It's just so you kind of get it. You know who's giving you clout, giving you access, whatever. And then that person has that mindset, and then they influence someone else. And that person now hasn't even been given an opportunity, but they're listening to that person, or they don't want to piss off that person, or they don't want to muddy the waters, or they don't want to create an issue, or because such a wall of anti-pro-Palestinian stuff has been created, I don't want to be pushing back against that. And so slowly but surely, this sort of cloud comes over a political movement, and that's how an influence operation works, where it becomes less and less tenable to call it out, to push back against it. And I know that because I'm involved in this stuff. I know pretty much everyone. I know most of the stuff, how it works. I've had money offered to me. I've had influence. I've had access. And if I were the type of person who sniffed out the strong horse, the good backing, if I had that in me, which I, to my fatal, you know, to my disadvantage, I just don't have it in me, right? If I did have that, though, well, I might be saying to myself at the moment, well, don't make a thing of that. I mean, we're ascendant. We've got backing. We've got support. We're all going great. We've got the tricolors. Like, either I'll stamp on a Palestinian flag or I'll say nothing. You know, I'll just go along with it. So now you have the influence up is getting people to stomp on the Palestinian flag, but it's also got the people who might be a little bit uncomfortable with it and a bit not into it, who think, well, I'm fighting against the tide now. It seems like all the influence kind of is on that, just more so than a few years ago. It's just this rising, this kind of growing, thickening cloud that I don't think it's worth the bother. Let's just all enjoy anti-immigration because it's not worth it. And so suddenly this thing has entered the political space and kind of nudged you out. That's the thought I lost track of there a while ago. Sorry, you can see why. That's how it works. It's complicated. Influence ops work from the top down. They are concerted and they are intentional at the top, and like from the top down to like the higher middle, you know, to varying extent. That's why it's very hard to find a smoking gun. Who took a deal? Who did this? Almost no one took a deal in so many words. You know, that's why it works and how it works. And that's the problem, is that they have the backing, they have the money, and they do have a certain amount of intentional actors who know exactly what they're doing, but they have more power. They have an Apache helicopter and you're running around with a stick. And so they can have this kind of profound impact because they have the money, they have the access, they have the tele-access, they have the institutional support. And the other thing is as well, of course, on the right, anyone who's like familiar with the right wing in general, and this mood is changing, but traditionally, it has been the case that if you're calling out immigration and this and that, Indians and buying up shops, or, you know, being nepotistic towards each other, and Muslims building mosques and being funded by Saudi Arabia, whatever it is, right? African black crime and whatever. If you're calling out these things, calling out all of that, you're the bad guy within the mainstream. You're going to get sacked from your job. You're definitely not going to write for a newspaper. In fact, the newspapers will write about you to get you in trouble. And so now you're like banished from the society in a way, right? And then you find this right-wing niche. There is actually a readout, a bastion you can go to where you're in the right wing. You can be a streamer. You can do super chats, you can do have some the Gatestone Institute or this or that, or you can get, you know, maybe you could get play, you could write for this or that thing or whatever. You can do that. Or at the very least, you can have friends and support. You can have followers. You can have your 20,000 followers, whatever it is, right? You can have your followers and become like an e-celeb. Great. And better yet, you get some institutional thing. Someone sort of hires you and gives you like solid money. The thing is, when you're in that position, if you start criticizing Jews in general, like the same way someone would criticize Indians or Africans or whatever the un-PC thing is, well, if you do that equally with Jews, you say, well, there's things about them as well. It's changing now, but hitherto you're burning that last bridge. You are. And it's obviously that's strange, because it's like, well, I thought this was the whole place where you stand up for your nation and you're not PC and you criticize everyone, all's fair in love and war and all that. Well, it turns out there's an exception there, right? So you definitely don't talk about that. And that's why there's a strange absence of that with the institutional right. You'll get it from the anons on Twitter and on Telegram, but from the institutional people, from the publications, right? You name them, right? That will be lacking. Various Jewish groups, Zionist groups in Ireland who are criticizing Ireland, calling us Paddystinians, calling us, we get anti-Semitism in our mother's milk. Even the Jewish groups who work, I could go through them. It's too late in the night. See, this is a stream that just could be so many streams. I have lots of tabs, but I mean, it's a pity. I would love to stream on this for hours. I could say so much and go through so much stuff, but it's late. I don't know. There was an article on Ron Unz, or one of these, Unz Review, who is himself Jewish, of course, but it was called Ongoing Jewish Influence in the Transformation of Ireland, and it goes through Alice Feldman. I mean, I can share some of this. You can just look it up yourself as well. Alice Feldman, you could go through it, all this basically woke stuff, right? So if you want to talk about woke, Alice Feldman basically set up Ibn Joseph. I think you have Laura Weinstein, and she says the so-called dangers of inbreeding. She says that Irish racists and people who are against immigration are just for the Irish inbreeding with each other because we're so inbred or whatever, and we need mass immigration so we don't end up inbred. This is Laura Weinstein in some prestigious academic position or whatever. You've Ronald Lenton, of course, Katrina Goldstein, Louise Derman on the perils of racist Irish children, la 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 la. It plays a big role. And of course, the right wing would happily talk about, well, Indian this and that and the other, and immigration and buying up houses with cost rental or cost buy or whatever it is, and black gangs and whatever. But, this just goes unsaid by the same people. They might not be ardent Zionists, but they definitely will keep quiet on this because you don't want to piss off the boss, effectively, right? And that is just a fact within right-wing movements across the West, institutionally at least. The anons on Twitter, of course, different, right? So that's a fact. That's the baseline. I'm not just kind of going, I think Zionism is weaponizing the Irish right wing, using it as a vehicle, with this sort of anti-pro-Palestinian thing, which obviously totally suits them because they can't get Ireland to be Zionist, like American evangelicals or something. They know they can't do that. But if I were sitting in Tel Aviv, right, and I were calling my buddies in Washington and London and a few in Dublin or whatever, we're all hashing it out and we're all experts in the rhetoric and the PR game and all that, right? World leading, right? You would obviously say, we can't get Ireland to be Zionist. We can't get Ireland to be stridently anti-Palestinian, but we could get it to be neutral. If we could do that, that's a win. They go, all right, but aren't you, surely you want Ireland to be actively Zionist, right? Supporting your cause, supporting your genocide and all that stuff. Surely that's what you want. Go for gold, right? They go, no. Given the circumstances, we deal with what's in front of us. A neutral Ireland, or at least a strong voice within in Ireland advocating for a neutral point of view, which is, of course, against, counterintuitively, that is against actively pro-Palestinian stance. A neutral position, a strong advocate for that nationally would be good for, that's a win. That's a huge win, because Ireland is gone. You know, Ireland is off the reservation as far as we can see. So if we could, against all odds, assert the idea that Palestine flags and Palestine advocacy is bad, it's a toxic thing, it's bad, and to be an Irish patriot is to say, I'm neutral, but I'm also stridently opposing people who are pro-Palestinian. While like not really mentioning people, like maybe sort of saying, well, I'm against Zionism too, but I'm tearing down Palestinian flags though, and making a big song and dance of it. That's a win. And if it's a win for them, they're going to notice it, and they're taking it. And they clearly, let's just be real, lads, they're taking it, right? We can see it. Everything I've mentioned, the vultures circling around, we can see it. And it's so important. It's such an opportunity to take that bargain, is to let the wolf in the door. It's not just Jews or Zionism, but it's the kind of everything else. It's corrupt is basically what it is. And when you let that corrupt entity, that key issue for the hegemon of the Atlanticist pact, if you let that in, then you've let everything in a way. And if you keep that out through the Palestine thing, through being sort of good on that, then they can't rub shoulders with you. Ezra Levant won't rub shoulders with me when I'm saying, hey, Ezra, how are you getting on? You know, good luck to you and all that. But I'm against immigration in Ireland. That's why I'm here. That's the main thing. But by the way, I'm also against the genocide in Palestine. He can't work with that. GB News and Telegraph can't work with that. And then someone could say, well, why would you drive away your support then? If they're your support, why do you drive them away? But again, it's like that's in conflict with actual organic political growth within Ireland and cultural growth, becoming culturally relevant. It's actually shooting yourself in the head for that play that you get with them, which doesn't really make sense if you're actually looking at it properly. If you're looking at it from your point of view as an activist, the success of you as an entity, as an activist, then it makes sense. And there's a distinction there that matters. And I just think it's a corrupting influence, full stop. I just wonder if any of you agree with me. I don't know. Am I on my own, or what's the fucking story? There are a lot of people, of course, who do. Like, I mean, like, it's funny. Like, I'll run into people. Like last week, I ran into several people. I went to Limerick, and there were several people, and I don't get like recognized. I'm not a big e-celeb or any of that. I'm small, but so I like one. My point is that getting recognized is not. It's like once in a while thing or something, right here and there. It's not common. But strangely, I went for a trip to Limerick, and I had a handful of them, which was weird. I haven't gone down Cork. I'm from Cork. I've lived in Dublin. I know a lot of people in Dublin. I've never really been to Limerick, and yet I went there, and I was like going, fucking hell, what's going on here? Like, no, in a good way. Obviously, it's like gratifying. I was delighted. The people I bumped into and who approached me and said hello, and the like, were all class. Like, weren't like weird basement dwellers or whatever the caricature is. They were all like well above average of people. Class lads, probably in their late 20s, probably making good money, doing well for themselves, very social, very well able, who were like, I know your stuff, I watch this, I know they know the crack, right? And said hello. And all these lads know what's going on, usually. These kind of quiet, so it's like, what I like about that is not like, oh, that's great, I got recognized. It's that I go, the anon that I'm starting to think is just not even real, that I'm crazy. Like, everyone watching or anyone following me on Twitter or any of that, am I the only real person? Is it all fake or what? What's going on? And then I go, holy shit, here's one of these anons. He's not only real, but he's fucking class fella, right? And not only that, but he's not going around like deluded. He gets the story he gets everything I'm saying and knows it well. And so I'm not alone. I just find that sort of rewarding, that the anons who get it, but just don't have the institutional play. They can't write for so-and-so or do this or that, or talk to Ezra Levant and get all chummy. they don't have to play there, but they're there. We are there, and that's just why I feel like it's important to talk about, because there's so much wind at the back of this sort of creeping Zionist influence, even though subtle, but it is real. There's so much wind at the back of that, and yet there's no wind at the back of opposing it. There's anons, and anons are right, and they have power online, and they push a message, and they do kind of grind the sand in the gears a little bit, but there's no one face person, we'll call it, right? Sort of doing it. So I'm just kind of going, well, I'll talk about it. But then it's so complicated, and then you don't want to be one dimensional. I don't want to be the guy that's going around calling everyone a shill and a fed and a this and a that, because I don't believe that. It's nuanced. It's complicated. It's smoke as opposed to something tangible. It's a thing that it's influence. It influences people in subtle ways through hierarchies and top down and all of that. But if no one's pushing back against it, if it's a loose cohort of people who just say, I'm against immigration, and and then the other side at the top know exactly what they're doing, and they are organized, and they do have money, and they do have backing, and they do have access, then that's how it is. And to put it another way, even when I do my Free Palestine and my flag thing on Twitter, right? I post that and it evokes this big response. But I'm kind of going, I feel that because I go, well, for my personal opportunities, if I wanted someone to throw me a bit of support, let's say, right, and get influence and get access, and I can hook you up with, I don't know, some big shot American Tucker Carlson or whoever it is going to be in Dublin, I can get you, and I wouldn't be interested, but to be honest, but if I was, it'd be cool to get to know all these movers and shakers and maybe get this or that, because that's how people are. I'd be going, well, the Free Palestine thing, I know it's right, I know it's an important message to kind of balance things a bit or whatever, and I believe in it, as I've described for the last whatever. But is it worth it though? It'll create consternation with the wrong people a little bit. So, and that's how it works. That atmosphere is how it works. I'm going to be honest, and even this might actually seal my fate. But take for example, big follows from big influential people. It crosses your mind that you might lose them if they see that. And you go, it is handy to have that sort of access, that follow, that influence, that connection, let's say. But if I say this, maybe your man, who might not be a shill or might not be co-opted or compromised or whatever, might be and probably is totally sincere and all that, but maybe might just, because they're influenced by this fog that I'm talking about, that they think, well, Palestine flag is the flag of the lefty traitor pro-immigration people, and it's something that they're not used to. It's bucking the partisan programming. They might just click the old unfollow. Fuck him. Actually, and you'd be like, well, it'd be a pity to lose this or that person, for the sake of that. Is it really worth it? That's sort of how the influence works, where I'm feeling it, even though I'm consciously against it. You know what I'm saying? And if that's true for me, then it's true for people who are less stubborn than I am, right? So that's just what I'm saying. I had a whole fucking pile of tabs here. I just need to start streaming more, because this just won't do. I could go for the next 4 hours and I can't do that. But there's so much. And I didn't even get into it. I just rambled. There's 750 of you there. I don't know how it works, but it tends to get, the later I go, the more people are there. Enemies will say it's yank bots or something like that. They have this theory that this schizo theory about this stuff. But or maybe it's are people trying to guess who the person I was talking about is? No, I'm not saying. I just whatever. But I need to talk about this more. Put it this way, I will talk about it more Or maybe I could just post all these tabs online or something if anyone wants to read them. Loads of stuff. See if anything jumps out at me here. They found a Israeli spy was meeting with Commission Naman, which is run by Jeremy Godfrey, who some speculate is Jewish. He's definitely British. Oh, that's the other thing, is the connection between Zionism, we'll say, Jewish Zionism, and British sort of loyalism, whatever it is, although I don't even know it all that well. But this collection of weird Masonic-y, loyalist-y, Britishy flags, Cromwellian vibes, creepy, strange vibes. No disrespect to English people. Most English people are totally great. I'm just talking about the regime they have, let's say, historically. Always the Zionist flag. There's this weird connection, of course, with loyalism and Britain and this kind of weird chauvinism and the Zionist flag. And so, like, again, that's obvious. Like, do you want, like, the connection between, like, the Anglo-American Atlanticist thing, the Zionist thing, and all of that versus Ireland at its heart, right? The real Ireland. You shave away the left and the right thing. We're naturally a bit inclined to Palestine, to put it mildly, for various legitimate reasons. It's cool. It's in vogue. It's counter-system. It's just and right because they are just fucking wiping people out, and it is terrible. And that's the other thing as well, by the way. It is wrong, right? And that's one of these things, right? Some of these big figures I've been talking about, right? You know, you'll get them saying, again, because the position has to be vague, and some people are just influenced. They don't even know they're shilling. They're just kind of picking up on things that shills have put out there, let's say, right? Like knowing shills. So there's the knowing and the unknowing shill, or just the mouse sniffing out the cheese and staying away from the poison, that sort of carrot and stick thing. But like, I've heard prominent figures say things like, oh, like Ireland shouldn't be getting involved in these foreign things. And you sort of go, while talking to the likes of Ezra Levant or the likes of a big American figures or whatever, sort of, and you're going, well, I don't know, is that the most pressing thing ever? Like, are you talking about giving aid to Sudan or something? Because I think between the lines, you're probably talking about Palestine. I feel like that's the vibe, but it's known that you can't just come straight out with it because it's not yet palatable. And so just kind of insert that. It's almost like someone was told by someone else, oh, totally, we love this anti-immigration thing, be anti-immigration, and all these Paddystinians definitely mentioned that too, because that's out of order too, all these crazy, you know, oh, okay, so these are the talking points now. That's the op. You know, agree, disagree, I don't know. Yeah, so you have Israeli spies meeting with ministers. You have Jeffrey Godfrey, a British, potentially Jewish Zionist, we don't know, but quite possibly, let's say. It runs the Censorship Commission in Ireland. Kevin Backhurst, allegedly Jewish Zionist, not sure. Figure it out. Running RTE. We have, what's her name? The woman who was down in Lismore in Waterford. I think it's Lismore. Eileen Lyons. Eileen, what was her name? Anyway, she works for the Holocaust Education Trust of Ireland, and she was down in, I think, in Waterford, berating people years ago on behalf of the Department of Justice. What's her name? Eileen Byrne. That's the one I'm thinking of. Berating people, and she works for the Holocaust Education Trust, I believe, which gets 200 grand from the Irish state to sort of teach people about some foreign historical alleged thing. I don't see why. I don't think Israelis are paying people 200 grand to teach their kids about the dangers of hibernophobia and the sadness of the potato famine on Gert Moor. It doesn't work that way. So there's loads of reasons why, across left, right, whatever, why there's it makes total sense for the right wing to sort of be, and the fact that, by the way, bar no country in the world besides, of course, from one point of view, Britain. You could say Britain is the most hyper-xenophobic country in the world because of the 6 counties. And that's sort of hard to dispute in one sense, right? They're occupying our country. But in another sense, the average English person isn't really too, as far as I know, too pushed about Northern Ireland. Probably don't even want it. And most British people are sound and they're not involved in all that stuff and whatever, this kind of statecraft stuff. Most British people don't have a big enmity towards Irish people. I think most of them like Irish people. I think most Irish people like most normal English people. So with that said, in terms of like grassroots, Israel is probably, in that sense, Israel is probably the most hyper-xenophobic country in the world by far. They, across the board, seem to despise Ireland. They're Catholic anti-Semites. They support Sean Russell. They oppose Israel again with Palestine. They love posting the old caricatures of Irish people looking like apes or whatever from like the 19th century or whatever. They're rabidly hyper-xenophobic. So the idea that the right wing, who, and that's like no exaggeration, like, I mean, pick your Pakistan, Australia, China, whatever, most of them would probably be like at worst sort of ambivalent about it and like don't know, don't care, you know, type of thing. If you're looking for what country in the world is most rabidly hyper-xenophobic at the top level and across the population, it's Israel, for sure. And working against us quite often because we oppose their genocide, which, I mean, we're entitled to, right? Just don't like take over someone else's country and kill a load of babies and we'll be grand. But and insofar as you do, we're going to oppose it rhetorically. I mean, that's, we're entitled to. Yeah, they are the most hyper-xenophobic country, and they have so many people involved in the, look at Sorcha Pollock, and who is like a descendant, her father is partially Jewish and all this, but has Jewish ancestry, and I think identifies that way. I don't know. But either way, writes new to the parish, right, with the Irish Times. And her dad was with, what was it, the I'm trying to remember it, Places of Sanctuary Ireland, the refugee settling and all this. And all of these different figures, so many of them are so chief among, it's just impossible to ignore. It's not about obsessing about them or saying they're chiefly and uniquely responsible for everything. But it's like, well, no, if you're going to criticize Indian immigration to Ireland and Muslim chauvinism within the country and praying in the middle of the day, disrupting their neighborhoods or whatever it is, halal and all that, well, why are Jews sort of getting a pass? I mean, there's loads to criticize. I'm sure there's good things and whatever, classical music or I don't know, but you know, same way as I don't think it's all about criticizing, castigating Indians across the board. Some of them are grand or whatever. But what I'm saying is, if the whole deal on the right is that you're unafraid to make legitimate criticisms of groups in spite of the blowback and all that, that's the whole gig. Well, why are Jews getting a big pass on this? They're like above it all or something. No, they have a huge influence, not unique, but a huge influence on a lot of these issues. And Zionists and Israelis en masse despise Ireland and make no secret of it. And it's not just about Palestine either. It goes back a while, right? They don't like us. It's kind of a thing of the feelings mutual. So why would the right wing be all on the whole thing? I don't get it, and I don't like it. Yeah, that was Eileen Byrne. Yeah, burn them all, I used to say, was her. She's a very arrogant sort of person. But yeah, like a lot of Irish people given these big roles with the Eben Joseph, like weaponized by this, her mentor or whatever. And we're all talking about Eben Joseph, but who gave Eben Joseph the idea? You know, that I don't think Eben Joseph is that much of a visionary sort of person, let's say, right? That's the other thing. Where did these ideas come from? To some extent, all tribes are chauvinistic and they'll grievance monger and all that stuff. Only to an extent, though, to be honest. I think people usually settle their differences, draw up their fences, mingle to some extent, get on with their lives. Same way in Iran, you have the whatever, the Armenian quarter of Shiraz or whatever. And, you know, they kind of coexist. They have their own territory. Like, the agreement is like, you don't march down the street agitating and breaking windows for bullshit. And then you'll also be left alone. You'll be allowed to have your space to a certain extent. And then to a certain extent, you'll pay taxes and be integrated and all that stuff. But you can just live your lives among yourselves. We're not going to be harassing you. We're not going to be shipping busloads of strange foreigners into your community to like break you. And we're not going to be teaching your kids to feel guilty about themselves and all that. We're not going to do any of that weird stuff to you. A lot of what happens is totally unnecessary. The toxicity of the whole thing. And where did all these ideas come from? Of guilt, of white guilt, of gender bending, of liberalizing, of all this kind of stuff, like all this woke stuff, right? Where did all of that come from? A lot of it is Jewish, right? And that's just a fact. And it's like, the thing is, it's funny, a lot of right wingers go, oh, he's going there or something. But if I came on and I said Indians are buying up half the properties and, you know, the commuter belt in Dublin and la 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 la, people would go, oh, that's par for the course. I just don't understand the distinction. That's my only thing. Well, why is there this exceptionalism? I don't accept that. And I certainly won't be influenced by it. You know, that's one of the issues. It's hard to go from this to like Dennis O'Brien talking about work from home. I just can't. It'll have to probably be another night. I was going to talk about the Kanye West album. I think it's class. That's another one. Some people might say, you're supporting a degenerate. I just thought it was class. I enjoyed the whole thing. But yeah, to give this a proper treatment, I would do many hours, open up all these tabs, go through it. Each one would end up absorbing 15 minutes. It warrants it. I'm going to do this one because it's related, right? Is that this is the kind of thing, and I'm not accusing this person of being a Zionist operator or whatever, but the whole idea, if you say like, well, okay, I've made my argument, let's say, over the last while, right? But if you're still left a bit kind of like, I still don't see how it matters that much. Like, I mean, if you get coverage from people and you get influence from outside, and all you need to do is be not pro-Palestinian and ideally oppose pro-Palestine stuff. If you can do that, then you're in good with the boss, right? Who cares? Just do it. I mean, fuck it. Like, they'll let you be anti-immigration. They'll let you be anti-brainwashing kids to be transgender, all the key issues that you want. So why would you not just take the bargain? Like, you know, is that bargain is inextricably linked, I would say, to one, pumping and dumping your political movement, which is just classic, right? All across, whether it's Trump or anyone else. The idea that you're going, well, I voted for you. We built up all this energy. You made all these promises. And then you just kind of go along to get along when you get elected. And in fact, you do the opposite. Like, look at the Tories and Boris wave and all this. Like, no one who asked for that, right? And yet they just did it. Same with Maloney and the rest of them. So, like, why is it that we can't just support someone for our political movement, which is clearly anti-immigration, wants a sweeping change against all this stuff? Why can't we? I'm on the Zins now, or whatever you call them. But why can't we just like put our political energies in supporting someone who comes along, knight in shining armor, and they say, I'm going to stop all this, we're going to roll it back, we're going to take back our country and all this. Why can't they just get into power, like as a 10-year-old might expect, and then they do it, right? And they face obstacles. Well, we do need a certain amount of migrant workers. We have to taper off, and we have to do this. We have to fight vested interests. But I'm going to do all that. We'll do it. It might not be instant, but we're definitely trying. Like, what I said I am, and I'm doing, and I'm fucking being honest with you. Like, that isn't sure. That should be normal. I don't get it. Like, isn't it very odd that it's always that sounds alien to us, right? Why? Like, so they come in as supposedly outsider, populist, all the rest of it. They then do get support from certain factions, Zionisty type factions, and then they just do fuck all. That's like tale as old as time. And it's not just related to Zionism, but it's always bound up with it, right? And so it's almost like a vetting thing, is that I would rather a slower growing nationalism and a more effective nationalism that appeals to all segments of the population, throws off all the stereotypes, reaches across so-called partisan divides, breaks the whole matrix kind of thing. Especially in the times we're in, where sort of the left has become an anti-PC as well, and going, I don't give a fuck if I'm called anti-Semitic. Actually, they're changing their minds. And once they've broken that, they don't mind about the racism or the sexism either. Then the matrix is kind of broken from the top, like I said. So like it's a perfect opportunity now to not become a partisan clown in the wrong direction, if you know what I'm saying. But if by doing that, you also resist, if you have that allergic reaction thing in your hand, then the whale isn't going to swallow you up, which is the same whale that pumps and dumps your entire political movement. The immigration stuff, nothing ever happens. It gets drummed up, it gets more popular, it gets more mainstreamed, but it goes nowhere. The people in it are all fucking fake, basically, right? And it's riven with partisanship, which I hate. Partisanship to some extent is inevitable and necessary, but it should be treated as a terribly unfortunate reality that you're constantly trying to avoid. That's my view. You should, when someone's shouting and screaming at you, you should go, I don't know why you're shouting and screaming at me. Like I want to agree with you and stuff. Like, well, what's the issue? But it's a way of rejecting that fucking con trick. Sorry, I keep cursing now. That con trick of like bait and switch. Like, here's your populist movement. Oh wait, it was all fake. And to a large extent, it's just big international money. Like the banks, the NATO, whatever you want to call it, that whole huge enterprise will not have individual countries go off the reservation. They will have a fake opposition sort of steer it in the right direction, right? And that's obviously how it works. Same way China wouldn't let some province. In China, they have this kind of form of democracy where local communities submit their views and it's going to be heard and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to let some Xinjiang province or some certain province or whatever of their country like go off the reservation because that's their opinion. They're not. They're going to deal with it, and you have unlimited resources for political monitoring, especially with the internet these days. I know I'm going on, but there's 800 of you here, so I'll take it. Like I said a while ago, 50 years ago, I never really finished that point, is that 50 years ago, political influence ops were enormously complicated and hard to put your finger on. Iran, Contra, you name it, right? American stuff in the 70s and all this. Extremely complicated and diffuse, but heavily funded and heavily backed. And with the fullness of time, things come out, and you go, wow, that was really fucking up, Can you imagine what it is now? I don't think any of us could fathom, and I'm not being a tinfoil hat here, but it's just logical. I don't think any of us could fathom the complexity of it. And so because we can't, we need to look at the heuristics. My thing is to look at what the regime seems to want and try to flip the script and avoid it. Because if you do that at a grassroots level, Carrick across, the next protest will be bigger. The next one will be bigger in Dublin. There might be people pipering it to some extent, but if you can keep the conversation in where you go, well, actually, we're kind of vaguely pro-Palestinian, if anything. We're neutral, but we're definitely not anti-Palestinian. That gives it acid reflux, and that's kind of a good thing. And you're breaking the parameters. And like I say, because it's so complex, all you can do, because we don't know, is sort of read the shadows. We can't see the object itself, but we can see the second order effects of what it wants or its movements. That's sort of my take on these things, is that's the best you can do in a way, is to read its movements. The best analogy I can think of, if you've seen Heat, right? Any of you have seen that film Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino? The final scene where they're in the airport and they're by these like power station blocks or whatever, and they're trying to take each other out, shoot each other. And basically, because they're such pros and because they're such hardcore guys, they both know what they're doing. They're both trained killers, basically. So they're in this death struggle with each other. One of them's going to go down, and they're trying to find each other in the darkness and in the obscurity of the whole situation. And because they can't see each other, The moment they see each other or one sees the other one is dead, right? If one sees the other first and gets him point blank, he's going to take him out. And so they're in this trained killer sort of mental struggle to be able to watch as the planes come in, the light cast by the planes, and when the pappy lights or whatever it is come on from the runway, they light up certain areas. And so if you can calculate all that, you'll see the shadow cast and you'll be able to nail him. Which corner is he actually behind? And that's what it's like with this politics, in my view, is that you can't kind of see or even understand what's really going on, but you can see the second order effects, what it seems to want, what it seems to be doing. And that's what I think it is. And this is where this article is sort of germane or pertinent to that. This is Finn McRedmond, right? Who is, again, another one of these who showed up with like éiRe acceleration or whatever, speaking to David McWilliams out in the Dalkey Book Festival, this kind of thing. Progress Ireland adjacent, we'll say, through a few stages of removal, which is a few stages of removal away from me. I know people who know people who know people. And I know it's cozied up culturally or wants to cozy up to the right, as does Ezra Levant and all the rest of it. This sort of empire, this whole thing. This is Finn McRedmond, this kind of, I would class as Anglophile person, probably younger than I am, I'd say, but like a what's the word? Parachuted in voice, you know? And I'm not being like, so I want to write for, who is it? The Irish Times. I don't want to write for the Irish. Well, I would I would, but like, I don't care. It's obviously not ever going to happen or whatever. Not something I care about. But take myself, for example. Take Keith Woods, better example. Big, huge name, right? Internationally known now, huge online, extremely cogent, serious, consistent, all that. Why wouldn't he write for the Irish Times? He's built up an organic audience, hundreds of thousands of followers, huge clout. You know, he could write for the Irish Times. He could show up at the events, be invited to this and that. But thus far, he kind of hasn't. And then you have these voices who, like, no offense to Finn McRedmond, but whatever her background is, like, no one ever heard of her. No one cares. Her opinions are not popular, really. They're not interesting. I find it interesting, but not particularly interesting, not particularly exciting. And yet she's getting columns for the Irish Times, columns for this, probably invited to, like I say, the David McWilliams. You could kind of go, well, who is this person, right? You know, but of course, just gets catapulted or like parachuted into, suddenly we are like digesting the slop. And the public is digesting the slop. She's a legitimate commentator, whatever, sort of. Okay. And what she's saying. And of course, deeply like wedded to, I've sort of half looked her up, the sort of Oxford sort of Tory Brit sort of, I think she's allegedly Irish, but this kind of like, I would just classify her as, I think I'm allowed to say this, an ardent West Brit, right? Sort of. And that comes with the Atlanticism and all the rest of it. And of course, you know, somewhere among that, probably that the interests and the point of view that she's representing would also be tied up with Zionism. Let's just put it that way. Now, what does she have to say about something here? She says, could a Nigel Farage or Georgia Maloney, right? I couldn't make this up myself. Could a Nigel Farage or Georgia Maloney be good for Irish democracy? We all know what democracy means, right? Moving the needle on the status quo here is almost impossible. It takes a figure with a rare set of qualities. I'm actually just going to read through it because it's like so enlightening in a sense. I'll skip the boring. Ireland has just, so she says, conventional dinner party wisdom goes something like this. Ireland has resisted the populist wave cresting over Europe, but it should be it's late and it should not be complacent. Sections of the public are agitated, apparent in attacks on proposed asylum centres and clashes with the Gardaí in places like Newtown, Mount Kennedy. The liberalising energy of the 2010s was not infinite, and Ireland is not immune from the broader global vibe shift based cool term against immigration. All it takes is a cohering, energetic figurehead to marshal the diffuse discontent. And this is how our centre collapses. Read between the lines, right? Roll that one out over a meal with friends on Friday night, and you will not be met with a sea of approving knowing, or you will be met with a sea of approving knowing, insufferably smug nods, bonus points for the Yeats reference. So we're looking at like spiked tier point of view here, right? That's the kind of thing. It's like centrist sort of polite writer. I don't know what you call that, right? None of it is wrong, of course, and it's certain, and it betrays itself so much here the way she goes on. None of it is wrong, of course. And by the way, I don't like whatever about this young one writing articles, right? It's about who she's writing on behalf of. She would say, I'm just giving you my opinion, right? But let's be real, it's coming from this point of view, this segment, this regime, basically, right? This side of the regime. None of it is wrong, of course, and certainly should give pause to Ireland's mainstream political class. Toughen up, sense the global directional change, maybe take a leaf or two out of Canada's blah, 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 blah. All the warnings about a Nigel Farage-esque or a Georgia Maloney light figure waiting in the wings are important too. We should be alive to potential ructions in the status quo, welcome or not, and no matter how unlikely. But there's something missing from this correct, if by now rather pedestrian analysis. Nigel Farage's and Georgia Maloney's are talented, effective, and rare. So she's basically, like the title suggests, advocating for one of them in Ireland, which is basically a fake populist who does fuck all, but diffuses the organic energy there, right? I suspect I feel more positively towards Farage than standard tastes in Ireland dictate. All these woke people, unlike me. But it is too easy to reduce a man to a simple run-of-the-mill far-right populist interested in whipping up anti-immigration sentiment. This may have been true of the UKIP years, but blah, 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 he's moderated, la, la, la. He's forcing the system to adapt, basically forcing the like former centre to sort of like evolve and like step into the current moment to maintain the regime effectively. He is preternaturally gifted, gifted communicator who, in spite of being in his 7th decade, has worked out how to use social media, blah, blah, blah. He can speak to the marginalized, discontented, the left behind, the white working class type of vibe, right? But something going under notice right now is the increasing appeal of his Reform Party. I'm just going to skip on, blah, blah, blah. She's basically selling him. We do not need to say that he is a good man. I doubt he is, okay? And we don't even need to believe in any of the material politics. That's mad, isn't it? It's just saying it. We don't even need to believe in the material politics. But a politician who forces the system to interrogate its shortcomings is good for democracy and might even counterintuitively help keep the real radical fringe at bay. But Farages are extraordinarily hard to replicate, and politicians like him do not crop up with irritating frequency. Blah, blah, blah. And so Ireland should never... just trying to skip through the nonsense. It's a generationally difficult thing to do, not least in a country where moving the needle in the status quo is rendered nearly impossible by the hegemonic establishment centre. A lot of time and column inches have been dedicated to Conor McGregor, the future of the radical right in Ireland, and the question of whether he could be the man who finally unites the discordant group and unleashes Ireland's jingoistic inward-looking tendencies. So she's like, we need a Farage, but like nothing jingoistic or nothing real or nothing like that. First, the existence of those tendencies is overstated, and second, of course not. I once believed that Conor McGregor might act as some kind of figurehead, a front for a clever behind-the-scenes puppeteer. What? But that's just mental. But I was wrong. Conor McGregor is more popular outside of Ireland. So she's saying Conor McGregor's a bust. Let's find another one. From her point of view, I like Conor. I think he's all right. But you know what I mean? That's what she's saying. And more than that, he has none of the rhetorical discipline or restraint of the truly successful populists. It is unclear what constituency he actually speaks to. He has faced numerous... Okay, she's still talking about McGregor. There is something else to take heart in too. Donald Trump, though this is a small saving grace, is proving the logic of a united Europe run by sensible metropole centrists of Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, and others. Dalliances with fringe politics might be an exotic quest for an electorate in peacetime. I hate this kind of writing, to be honest. It's just like, okay. But as threats start to feel existential and the stakes rise by the minute, and in Ireland at least, the fringe should be understood as a frivolous and unserious distraction. Here's the key. The task for the centrist establishment is not to focus too heavily on an insurgent far right that doesn't exist, but to instead counter threats that actually do. So I think she's talking about the pro-Palestine left who like refuse to go along with all of that, and they won't back down. Like the pro-Palestine sort of left center won't back down to being scared off by call this or that. And I think the thing that would scare the shit out of them the most, I mean, sorry, it's late. It's kind of hard to read like this kind of language. It's a bit overdone, but it's basically what I mean. The headline says it all. Could a Farage or Georgia Maloney be good for Irish democracy, preserving the status quo effectively, just with a new lick of paint? She's right. Someone like that could be good, and someone like that, of course, would be denouncing the Paddystinians first and foremost, and using the anti-immigration thing as a vessel, as a vehicle. And that's what it's all about. And I just think if I were going to the people she's speaking, the powerful interest that she's sort of speaking for there, I think, if I were to analyze them and say, what don't they want? They don't want an Irish right-wing nationalist populist movement. That sort of, basically, if there was one thing that poisons the well for them, it's that if our side of things were to be either pro-Palestinian or ardently refusing to be anti-Palestinian, going with the flow, oh shit, they would say, we have this left wing or center that is ardently pro-Palestinian, and now we have the right wing who are meant to be our vessel for Nigel Farage, who are also that way, and they're also sort of anti-capitalist, and they're speaking to the masses, they're speaking to the TikTok young generation, and they're sort of reaching across the aisles, breaking the molds. They're saying, fuck it, we don't care if we're anti-Semitic, we don't care if we're racist or sexist or any of this stuff, and we are pushing back against foreign ownership of all the houses and the estates and all the rest of it. We're doing all that, and we're not your fucking plaything. We're not doing that. So then they've lost the Irish left. They've lost what they hope will be their plaything, the Irish right. And it's off the reservation, and everyone's getting along great. And it's like a true united populist kind of uprising. And that requires a bit of diplomacy internally, you know, and they just want to screw that up before it can happen. So I think Finn McRedmond's thing was a good exposition of that. I don't want a Nigel Farage being good for Irish democracy. I want real change. I want a real political movement. I want a united national political movement. I want to work towards that, and that would scare them. And what scares them is good, sort of logical. So I suppose I might finish up on that. Does it make sense, lads? Does it all of that make sense, or am I gone mad? I might talk about Dennis O'Brien and the whole culture of you can't get good workers and this and that and the other, and they want too much, you know. They want to be paid, and they, you know, I'm giving them 50 grand or whatever. I just think it's funny because the money is cut in half in the last 10 years, and yet the asset owners are making so much more. And there's this kind of hostility. Even when you go to even something like a mechanic now, they go, oh, the workers, they're all entitled now and stuff like that. There's a whole spiel on that. I'm obviously not doing it justice right now. I'm kind of done. But and so much more I could have looked at. I wanted to give this a good treatment, and I almost don't think I have, in a way, you know. It's like, I think it needs an essay. It needs, because I'm kind of pulling at threads and stuff, but it needs an essay. I think I need to do an updated essay on why, basically, in essence, why neutrality on the, like art neutrality. Don't fly an Israeli flag, and don't fly a Palestinian flag for sure. Let's be aggressively neutral or whatever. I would say from a Zionist point of view, which I've already demonstrated has huge pull or reason to subvert along other interests, the right-wing movement in Ireland, I think that's reasonable. And from their point of view, a aggressively, strenuously neutral position from the right in Ireland, they consider in effect pro-Zionist, because to them that is a win. To them, that's moving the needle sufficiently. And it's a complex idea. It can be People can pull up some video of some transgender weirdo or whatever. Well, he supports Palestine. Okay, yeah. But there's so many little threads that need to be kind of pushed back on. Maybe I'll put it in One Neat Substack or whatever. But yeah, someone says up Limerick. Yeah, I like Limerick. Look, I enjoy it. Limerick seems to like me anyway. A couple of people do, and it's a good city. It's just the train station area is pretty bad. That's all I was trying to say about it. But anything Munster, I like. I'm pro Munster. So anyway, a couple of super chats there. So Occident Advocate 5, thank you, says, rise you Gaels, raise the flag of the green onto the streets in your hundreds of thousands. Those who take the street eventually take the state. Well, my view on taking the street and all that is, if you can, I saw Derek Bly recently said, he said that if they could have beaten Coolock on the anti-asylum demonstrations, if they could beat Coolock, they've beaten everywhere, because Coolock's such a tough neighborhood. And on the flip side, I would say, because there's a demonstration upcoming in Cork, I've always said, in terms of taking back the streets in Ireland, which years ago you couldn't go out on the street and allegedly be called far right or whatever, you'd be hunted away, or some Antifa would get you or whatever. You didn't have the numbers of the support, and the guards would look the other way if they beat you half to death. So it was kind of hard to go out and hand out a leaflet, demonstrate anything. And then we managed to take back pretty much the whole country. And I've always said, because Cork has such institutional dominance of this Marxist-y kind of thing, and Cork people are kind of quiet, they just kind of look after themselves, mind their business. You only have this UCC kind of culture in the city that's dominant. It's basically very captured, even though I love Cork. It's my favorite city in Ireland, objectively. I've always said, because of all that, if you can take the streets of Cork, if you can have a big successful demo there, get away with it all, do your thing, get out without incident, have the bigger numbers and all of that, then you've taken the country. Cork is that last bastion. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Just your question reminded me of that. And then Armchair Limerick Nationalist 5, thank you, always supports the old streams. 7 for the Ramble, Garrow, no bother. All right, so lads, I'll leave it with that. We'll follow up on this, and it needs more talk. This needs more discussion. You can't sit back and sort of let it happen, because while you're saying, well, it's grand, I'll just say nothing, or is it worth the consternation or whatever, the people, Ezra Levant and his friends and all the others behind the scenes and the people domestically and stuff are working together and chipping away slowly, and they want what? Ultimately, Finn McRedmond is talking about here, a fake right wing as almost a bulwark against real change, and excoriating the Paddystinians. So we don't want that. I think that's a fair point. Anyway, good night. Go to bed. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Ihoa.